Welcome to Your AI Bootcamp. This is a 4-week intensive bootcamp where we'll be working on goal setting, a professional glow up, crafting your story for other people to hear you better and getting credit for your work. And lastly, a demo day, coffee outreach, expanding your amazing network to hit your goals faster and be seen. Your AI Bootcamp is where your AI career begins and takes off. Come join us, yourairoadmap.com/career. Hi, my name is Joan Bajorek. I'm on a mission to decrease fluffy hype and talk about the people actually building an AI. Anyone can build an AI, including you. Whether you're terrified or excited, there's been no better time than today to dive in. Now is the time to be curious and future-proof your career, and ultimately, your income. This podcast isn't about white dudes patting themselves on the back. This is about you and me and all the paths into cool projects around the world. So what's next on your AI roadmap? Let's figure it out together. You ready? This is Your AI Roadmap, the podcast. Hey folks, this is Joan. Jumping in really quickly before the episode starts. So this is actually a super special bonus episode. I speak on this episode with my phenomenal CTO, Jennie Stenhouse, and we talk about my career and choices and these quote unquote overnight success, not true, tons of work behind the scenes, of how, if you've ever wondered like, hey, how did Joan get here? Like what's going on? This episode, we dive into my background in French and linguistics and being curious and not trusting what people say when I find data that says otherwise. You will definitely get a perspective of who I am, how I am to work with, the relationships in my company. I'm just so honored to get to spend this precious time with my CTO and to share it with you. Okay, let's jump in. Hey, Jennie.
Hello, Joan. It's so funny. We speak so often, but we hardly ever say each other's names because we're so used to talking. It's quite interesting.
Oh, I talk about you all the time in every other
to
meeting.
Others, but like, how often do you say my name out loud to me? Like, it sounds weird. Yes, in this special episode of Your AI Roadmap, we get to talk about you, which is probably like what a lot of people want to hear about, seeing that you've been the host for so many interesting episodes and got to speak to so many interesting people so far. So I suppose we should say who I am, and then you can say who you are. Why don't you do your quick intro first?
Sure. Hi, my name is Joan Bajorek. I am the CEO and founder of Clarity AI. I'm the host of Your AI Roadmap, the podcast, and the forthcoming book I'm publishing with Wiley. I'm also the founder and current president of Women in Voice. I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor, I'm an influencer, connector, that multi-hyphenate thing my sister is embarrassed about and never can quite say what I actually do at holiday parties. Anyway, that's me.
Awesome. I think that slash thing, entrepreneur / author / angel investor / anything else you want to be is actually what the future is going to look like for the majority of people anyway. Although it may be awkward to introduce yourself at dinner parties, it's going to become something so common and people will become more used to it as well. I mean, I don't know about your parents, but my parents had the same jobs for their entire careers. And like, how often is that? How often do you meet someone who's been in the same position for 10 years or 5 years? So I think, the pivotability and action is going to be for the future. I should say I am Jennie Stenhouse. I am the CTO of Clarity AI, and I had the pleasure of meeting Joan through Women in Voice, where I acted as the COO for a while.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I was literally thinking the other day, like, so I launched Women in Voice on Twitter. And did you see it on Twitter, or like, how did we align the dots there?
Yeah, I think I saw it on Twitter, and then there was some sort of like join a call and meet people thing. And then during that call, there was like, can someone do XYZ? And I was like, yes, I can do XYZ. And then I think it moved on to the Slack community and it sort of took off from there with our interactions.
So people kept being like, who's this Jennie person? She keeps raising her hand to do work. And we had plenty of work. And it's just wild to me that we crossed paths that way. And people like, you've been working together how long now? Or like,
Yeah.
anyway, I'm just so lucky to have met you, and
Oh,
our,
shucks.
our
You
customers
too.
fall in love with you, and then they kind of poach you, amongst other fun things.
Mm.
Well, cool. Well, we're going to go through the regular questions.
Yeah, I think that's a good way because then you can be in the hot seat for a change instead
It's
of
not very
just your
comfortable.
guests.
I don't like it very much.
I know it's funny, like how comfortable you get with being the host. So now it's your turn to answer the hard questions. So I suppose I should stick to the format initially, so you know a bit about what's coming. So right now, what is? I know you've got many projects going on, and lots of them you probably can't talk about. But what are you working on? What's one way that an AI focused project that really is lighting you up right now?
Oh, yeah. Well, as you mentioned, there are so many that I wish I could speak about that are under NDA, and maybe later I could speak about publicly. The one that people have maybe heard me talk about, or is public, I'm allowed to talk about it, is Agria. My team is working with a company, agriculture company in Virginia, and the CEO is William Layton. We are working on custom AI and data infrastructure. So his business works on growing medium and let's see if I can use all the correct words: sustainable, vertical farming, completely organic, really high yields of crops. 170 different crops he can grow, and really thinking about modularity of how you can grow things inside sustainable agriculture. And so, as he thinks about scaling his business, and currently it's pen and paper, when he has one farm versus 10 farms versus thousands of locations, etc., documenting that and having an infrastructure for the data and what we can do with the data and machine learning and kind of the AI architectures that are built upon that, but really starting with some basic sensors, some app dashboards, really starting small with huge impact. So that's one of the big projects that we're working on.
It's so interesting to hear, and like, of course, I'm your CTO, so I know about this project. But like, how this is not HR, this is not content creation, this is not like a internal work, your typical paping pushing AI automation. It's something in a completely different vertical than most people think about when they think about AI. What other verticals do you think are sort of like untapped gold in that respect that are outside of that traditional, when you think about what the tech bros are doing?
Totally. Well, and I think I'm so lit up by agriculture. We're doing other projects in what are traditionally kind of blue collar sectors. Things that I've seen recently. Not that we're doing a project in this yet, but in trucks hauling things, and kind of here in the United States we have AAA that helps you move your car if there's a problem, but most Americans do not have AAA, and so like towing. The word is towing. I saw this startup in towing recently that's making hand over fist by
Mm.
having an app that actually is data driven for pricing. And I was just like, how cool is that? And unsurprisingly, towing doesn't have a lot of software and AI folks in it yet. And so I think there's huge opportunities as everyone else. How many projects and bots have I worked on it in contact centers,
Yeah.
customer service? Like literally the last 10 years, that's what paid the bills for me a lot. But these projects are more diverse. They're different stakeholders. There are very few software Chad bros. Like it's a completely different thing with huge opportunities, as you and I both know.
Yeah. And I like how that opportunity isn't just like, the monetary payback, which we appreciate, of course, and are very interested in, but it's also like the impact to daily working life that looking at some of these different verticals can really have. So when you look at your own success or the success of a project, what are some common metrics that you actually think about? Like you can go, this is the measure by which I've done well.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a toughie.
It's a toughie. I mean, we define different variables and say like, this is how we move the needle. This is when we deploy the project and they see the dashboard and the customer says, "Ta-da! That's what I needed." Or like, I feel like there's a light bulb moment for the customer that happens. That's one of my key pieces of success. Paying my team a happy team. Someone was recently asking me like, "How do I hire?" I was like, "I don't have that problem. Typically, like people love usually to work on these teams and projects. How do I measure success? Gosh, I think for at least this agriculture one, I really see how our work directly relates to climate change and impact for people on the ground. Luckily, I'm allowed to talk more about this, but we have customers who are veterans. We have customers around the world where they don't get fresh food often, and people literally tell me about losing huge amounts of weight because the food is so bad. They're just like as I see climate change impact my region and my world, to be able to work on a project that's tangibly working on sustainable food locally as we see problems in supply chain. Maybe everyone feels this in a different way, but like that I'm actually like the vestiges of my hands and my team's like work is on that really, really hits home for me.
And as like an entrepreneur, do you find that like because it's a shorter line between your actionable work and impact rather than, being employee 10,005 at Google, like how do you feel about that being like on your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, well, I think about it more in like I have a lot more agency. There have been several times at different companies I've worked at or startups where I don't agree with management. I can't imagine anyone has ever felt that in this room. But at the end of the day, you like I bring a proposal to a CEO and say, "Hey, my best recommendation is X. Here's all the steps I've gone through." And sometimes they agree, sometimes they don't agree. It's not my call at the end of the day. Here at Clarity AI, we bring things to stakeholders. We can walk away like if a customer's not treating us well, etc. So like I feel different about pay equity. I feel different about agency, setting my own hours, setting my own travel schedule.
So some
Yeah.
of that measure of success could be this freedom that you're talking about,
Oh
like
my gosh, yeah. How many customers, Jenny, want to like own us and like acquire us? And we're like, actually, we love our freedom. That's one of the perks of the gig, not the other way around. I don't know if that'll change. Let's see if one of them acquires us in the next 3 to 5.
mm.
For
But then
for
you'll have like a financial freedom, and because it's your brain that is running, your current entrepreneurial journey, you can roll it up and do it again. I think that's like an interesting point for like as you get into AI or thinking of like little tools you can roll up in no code situations or whatever. You're like, yes, this experiment or this, I can do this for this instance, and then it works, sweet. It doesn't work, let's roll again. That it's quick to turn around.
it is.
What has really surprised you or challenged you from going from, what I probably see as quite a safe 9 to 5, although are any 9 to 5 safe now, to this entrepreneurial journey in the AI field?
Surprises. Right now, I think my surprise is how much sales and kind of financial stuff I have to do. Recently, for a certain project, we did a 5-year projections of the fiscals, and I don't have an MBA. I make money for myself, but like to really think about a company's P&L, profit and loss statement across a huge span of time, how many humans will we need? How much computing do we need? Like that type of fiscals at the table with investors is outside my comfort zone or burgeoning on like whoa, but luckily we have a bookkeeper who's looking over things. I mean, it's not me alone, but that like sales, money, how we play the game. Like I think I've joked about this, but like I owe some salespeople and biz dev in my life some apologies because that job is way harder than I anticipated. There's a man named Alex out there. If you're listening, I am sorry, and I owe you an apology. It's some really hard finessing of not only the numbers but the relationship management, like that sales and finance piece is really getting sharpened right now for me.
That's awesome. One of the things I noticed through your other guests that they all seem to mention is that this constant curiosity and lifelong learning. And that I
Mm.
think is very true when you have to switch hats so many times or like be able to speak in the vocabulary of that domain. So like I know from my experience with all these financial tasks that we've had to do recently that my vocabulary in that area has definitely been extended and very pushed to the limit as well.
Well, and there's nobody else. You look around and you're like, oh, at this point, our team is so lean. You point around and it's you.
Yeah, but the great thing about it is that the next time we encounter a project in like finance or in like this projection space or particularly in P&L, we can be like, well, we've just done this. We know that this was like a major bottleneck for us. What if we can automate that section?
Oh,
Or,
totally.
I think like from my development background, one of the best places to start with for project ideas is problems that you have yourself, because it's very rare that you're the only one with that problem. So if you can solve it for yourself, it means that you maybe have a product idea that can be solving this problem for other people as well.
For sure. Well, and this is something I actually came upon a different day when I was talking with investors about how they evaluate AI startups, which is so ironic and very meta. And we were talking about how a lot of them don't budget in computing costs, like as they set at P&Ls. And someone asked me, like, do you do consulting for the fiscals of investors or startups as they are making multi-year projections? I was like, no, but someone should hire me to do that.
Yeah, totally. That can be another service offered. I find it so interesting because I don't think it's just, it's so easy to forget how much computing power and how much resources are actually lent to your, like even when you ask ChatGPT a single question, there's huge resources behind that. And it's easy to forget them because the user experience is so invisible, right? And I mean, it's the same with search. This is not the first time that we're sort of making all that impact invisible. But yeah, if you even do a Google search, you've got to think about like what's actually ticking in the background, and
Well,
which is just like tenfold. No, not at all.
Well, and this morning I was literally writing the chapter of my Wiley book about computing and the environment and these like computing costs being the size of a small nation into the next projections. And like, we don't have a lot of good benchmarking for carbon footprints of AI, probably by design. Do people want to measure their trash? Like,
yeah, it's that thing about how the landfall is never in the city center, right? And because all of these data centers and the resources that they're using are not in your backyard,
right.
it's easier to gloss over that section.
It's just a cloud. It's in the air.
It's in the cloud. Yeah, I like it when like you talk to older people like, oh no, that's in the cloud. And they're like, is it? Like, yeah.
It's hard to explain. Anyway.
Well, I think that the best way to think about it is the cloud is just someone else's computer. It's not your computer. It's on someone else's computer.
Oh, well, the current version of the book has pictures of the data centers.
Yeah.
They're really ugly.
Well, generally. Have you
Excuse data centers.
So we've kind of covered up what my next question is, which is like, what have you learned from, like, say, the Agro project overall? What's like some really impactful things you've taken away from the process that you've been partaking in so far?
Yeah, so many. Gosh,
so many.
I think the off the bat, the relationship with my stakeholder, and he is all good. William,
start again.
It's fine.
Cut. Scene.
My customer is a fabulous human to work with, and he has his zone of genius and we have our zone of genius, and the ability to work together and be in different really important meetings, kind of good cop, bad cop, like really complementing our skill set. And sometimes when we don't agree, but we align on the goal. Actually, you thought you were going to be doing this, but the goal of the meeting is just about getting the partner to the next round. The goal is actually this. And so our communication and deep respect and learning from each other. I mean, people, like literally in business, that's the name of the game. One of the things I love about this agriculture project, in addition to learning more about agriculture, which is a new domain for me, is like, I've just been in voice and conversational AI, and I really am burgeoning out to think about architectures and kind of how we think about sensor data integrated into our data sets and triangulating how like I just hadn't ever worked on a project quite like that in the way that we foresee the next 3 to 5 years going with this project. So it's just really hard to close really, really big dollar signs. The dollar signs just keep getting bigger. So you and I have talked about like sometimes it feels like play money, just like you project out into be like the number of millions and billions and becoming a unicorn for some of our customers. We're just like, whoa. The algebra, we're not in the scrimpy places anymore. We're really thinking about selling to governments, selling to military. Like these are big projects, big impact, big dollar signs.
And I like how in this particular case as well, they don't care that it's a small team. They just want to see a team that can make things happen. So I think that's, important if you're on your own journey in this space, is that you don't need to instantly hire a team of 20 devs to get off the ground, but you might have to be willing to go to 99 investor meetings at least to get a yes, or figure out a way to be revenue positive before you even have to ask for investor money. Yeah, I think that's probably one of the big learnings that I've taken away from that as well. Talking about these different verticals, where do you see, and it's interesting, for you, it's across different fields that different AI technology can be used. You're not connected or rooted in just one application of like this nefarious, well, amorphous word we say is AI. It could be so many different applications. So how about you answer, yeah, I guess we can stick with the original. Where do you see your AI field heading? And then, just, it seems like a too narrow a question in a way. So
Okay.
answer what you will.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I've been asked this type of question of like the big future of AI or like the big future of blah, 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 how many times across my career. And I feel like for me, the biggest time, I think people actually laughed at me when I said this at CES. I was at CES 2020, and I was like, I want really practical stuff. I want productivity tools. Why, in this day and age, do I write emails? Why do I have a keyboard? Like, like there are so many things that I think are such low-hanging fruit that I don't know if Clarity AI is going to tackle, but like when I think about our everyday devices, when I think about really big impacts to different populations, or like the simple thing of my dad having ginormous hands, he hates typing. Like you should see his emoji usage. You know what I mean? Like I strongly believe that that which we find default today is going to radically change. In researching the book, one of my friends has this quote about like the smartphones we use today are going to be thought of as like us as like monkeys with boxes of the transformations we're going to see in the near future. He is actually working on them, so he would well know. But I think I just went to I was a judge at an AI startup fair a few days ago, and they talked about all these different sensors within the tech that we have, like how this cup today is just a cup, but could there be sensors about my saliva? Like could there what data is all around us right now that is not being leveraged in the slightest? Of course, there's privacy concerns. What are you doing with that data? Is it even useful or helpful? Why did you don't care about my saliva? I don't know. But like the abundance of it that right now is not being leveraged. So I think that we don't need to go overboard and overkill, but some basic perfunctory, like practical daily tools for the relatively mundane are so powerful. So powerful.
Yeah, that's so cool. I agree with that. Like, it's super cool to see Sora generate, amazing video, but I'd like my calendar to be structured better. Like
Literally.
really simple stuff that I want to become invisible, like that daily life admin that no one wants to do. That if that could be taken care of, we suddenly have this cognitive load for more interesting stuff. And like you say, it doesn't have to be huge. It can be simplified.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then like with this huge data landscape we're already creating, and would be like even more intense with all this other sensor input that could happen in the future, I think we'll need tools to navigate that in an intelligent and, a way that is actually beneficial. Because like you probably know from personal experience, having lots of numbers doesn't actually help if you can't create insights from them.
Nope. Nope. And is it even actionable? Are you just building a data repo that no one even
Oh,
like
and
knows
there's
about or
tons of them.
leverages?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've been doing like GIS research and just seeing how many siloed data stores there are that like then replicate the same data in a slightly different formatted way, which means that you can't just marry them. It requires a lot of cleaning, and you're like, oh, why are we doing this? Why are we wasting so many cycles on doing the same thing over and over again? We should
Well, but
automate it.
we should. Well, and that's one of the things. One of the startups I saw that was so super cool is working on, like a COVID test, that strip. They're working on a similar type of strip for endometriosis, which apparently takes about 10 years to diagnose, and a $20,000 surgical procedure here in the United States. it's a serious problem. And I was like, wow, like, why did you choose this problem to tackle? The person said, well, actually, someone from the medical center at the University of Washington walked into our office and said, this is such a bad problem. Can you please start working on this? Like, because people can literally walk from one part of the campus to the other. And I was just so, at first I was like, and then I was like, the medical field has this pain point and is asking startups to innovate because we're so far behind. And this product is another 7 to 10 years out. If it even passes regulatory stuff, I was just like, I was like, this is a tiny little prototype. Like, shouldn't this exist? Anyway, it was that scoping of real tangible problems that can change people's lives and companies, medical centers, excited to purchase them
Yeah.
who want these things.
Exactly. That's super cool. And now you're in this sort of like position of encountering all these, these more ability to identify these problems across different verticals. It's not like stuck in HR or, content creation or whatever. But how did you start? How did you find yourself here?
Gosh, you wouldn't believe. Yeah. Okay. Well, the language part, or like my background in linguistics, would not be of surprise to my 8-year-old self. Like, my sister reports that I was like teaching her languages when we were kids. Like, I was always really, really curious about languages and cultures. And I'm really grateful my parents were always like, here's this French movie of this, or here's this like cool Spanish food, or like there was always this like love and excitement around international understandings. And my parents, instead of saving up for like big screen TVs, they would like save up for tickets to Thailand. You know what I mean? Like, I certainly have those type of parents. I started learning French as a preteen. And I think one of the things when I think about like, I've looked at myself as I differentiate myself from my peers, and I'm trying to figure out like where were those pivot points, or like things that really, do you know what I mean? Like set me aside. And one of the things that I'm 5'8", I'm a little bit tall for the US, not too tall, but as a kid, I was really tall. I was in the 97th percentile. So it was like Joan and like everybody else. And I think that like the tall aspect and being an extrovert, and like I feel like I knew what I wanted like regularly. I had a very really clear vision, was really helpful in a lot of respects to like think of myself as a leader, or like assume the position of the loud, clear-sighted person who like says what she wants. So fall in love with French, getting into languages. I went to the University of Washington for my undergrad degrees and majored in French and photography, which everyone's like, we thought you were intelligent. Those don't make you any money, right? Like, that's a terrible idea. Like, why do you do that? Like, all my friends were pre-med, engineering, this, that, and the other, computer science. Do you know what I mean? Like, these really stable, make lots of money, prestigious career paths seemed just like directly there for them. They just like went around the table. I was like, you must be stupid. But I think when I think about a humanities background being my initial degrees, communicating effectively, visually representing my ideas from in my head to on a slide deck, on a wall. Like, those are skill sets I use literally every day that people pay me 5 figures for. You know what I mean? Like, it's extremely, extremely valuable skill set. Well, I mean, now we use Canva, right? We didn't have that before, but so that kind of thing. And I think also, as I think about my personal brand, and like someone recently asked me if I like hired someone to like create my persona online. And I was like, you don't think I could do that for myself? Like, excuse me, I'm a little bit offended. But that kind of understanding of the intentionality of what we put online and how we talk about projects. So then I went off to France because I really thought I was just going to live in Europe. I was like, enough with this US thing. Like, Europeans have better food, blah, blah, blah. And I worked for the Ministry of Education down in Toulouse, teaching English and like cultural stuff to underserved middle schools. And it was hard. It's kind of like a Teach for America here in the United States, except in France. And I really missed the academic intellectualism. I missed that pursuit. I kept giving my students like surveys and things because I wanted the data. Imagine my coworkers are like, what are you
What
doing?
are you doing?
What are you
Creating
doing?
more work for yourself.
Literally. But I also really loved my students were middle schoolers, like the agency, the excitement they got when I asked them their preferences. What do you want to learn? Like, what can you imagine as like a 13-year-old being asked what you care about
Yeah,
instead of
the
just
power
being,
of personalization, especially
oh
like
my
a
gosh.
while ago. Now it's pretty standard to expect, sorry,
Yeah.
to expect things to be the way you want them to be. But like, yeah, you were ahead of the curve there.
Well, and I think when I don't even, I just really wanted to know. Like I was just like, what is what is their goal? They're like forced to come here. But I think also that like those data points was another indicator to me that I wanted to go to grad school. It
Mm-hmm.
was like do I want to be in Europe and meet somebody and like stay, etc. I met someone like anyway, no, not the point. But the really thinking about would I be happy being a language teacher? Like if, of all the paths I could take, like that was something I definitely considered. And I just was like, this is not enough for
Mm-hmm.
me at this point. So applied to grad school and got in and went to California. So from France to California. And gosh, University of California, Davis. It's about hour and a half east of the Bay Area. And gosh, I loved it. You biked everywhere. It was super flat, sunny, like almost every day of the year. Like I grew my hair out long, like it was California days, and I was getting my PhD in French linguistics. All kinds of things happened there, Jenny. Gosh, but I really I took all these different diverse courses in linguistics, morphology, syntax, semantics. Fell in love with phonetics, like all this acoustic stuff, like these speech sounds that come out of your meaty flesh, like actually have meaning, and like how do we parse them? And like this is circa 2014, 2015. Like natural language processing was in a completely rudimentary place compared to today. It was thought of like super hard, like parts of speech, tagging, like, and I was really interested in phonetics, and people were like, why are you going into the hardest like dark horse things? Like these may not be solved in our lifetime. Like, why don't you just stick to some of the easier stuff? Like you get a job. I don't know. Um, but I was voraciously interested in that. And I saw Duolingo's early product stuff about like you speak into it and it like tells you if you're good enough and you learn some vocabulary in a different language. And I was like, whoa, who built this? How did they choose what's good enough? Like
Mm.
you speak into it, like, and it lets you go through. Like I wanted to, that builder part of me really started to come out. I wanted to be in that room. I wanted to be one of those 3 to 5 people deciding what they were building on the
Mm.
app. Like, I didn't know anything about software development at the time. I just, it was like a window peering in to that field. So kind of that linguistics, phonetics. There's a bad advisor. I'll just gloss over that part. But I got a master's and I got a large fellowship at the University of Arizona. And by that time, I knew I wanted to go into tech. So there's kind of maybe I'll be a professor to like, being a professor means make little money and live somewhere I don't want to live. Okay, next. Yeah, and the University of Arizona. Gosh, I'm telling it really long-winded, Jenny. I'm sorry. I can just move faster. But like each one of these, like the parts of my life, there were all these like micro pivots. Do I want to
Mm.
do this? Shall I explore that? Like it was a huge amount of investment time. Like I think people think of my career as like overnight or like ta-da. And I was like, I was grinding for years.
Mm.
Years.
And lots of tiny decisions, like movies tell us that it comes to like a crux point and you're like, I've got to decide X or Y today to, save the world or whatever. But actually it was like you had to decide A and B back here and you took B. So that means now C and D is open to you and maybe E, but you need to go back to B. Like this pathway isn't linear and it's definitely not overnight and there's a lot of hard effort involved in it. But it is things that you can start working towards, or like you say, it isn't always giant leaps that determine your path. So making small decisions is helpful. Keep going. We're in
Okay.
Arizona.
Yeah, in Arizona. Well, and I would say also like I felt like the jungle. Like I literally was trying to figure out the path amongst like this wild adventure and like the path that exists today. If I could just really quickly just speed up over to 2024, like the ability to just download models and huge repos of data sets from Hugging Face did not exist in the same way in 2015. Okay.
No.
Like the ability to build as fast as well as what we're building today, that just didn't exist. So some people ask me like, why did you need a PhD? Why did you get a master's? Like all this kind of thing. I'm like, if it were just today and I got to like wind back, but see, I couldn't. Okay, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
Time travel. like the opportunities for rising 20 somethings today did not
Completely
exist for
different.
me.
Yeah.
It just didn't exist. So
Yeah.
use the opportunity, please. I'm not
Yeah.
jelly.
Yeah, exactly. Like the amount that like you can just like sign into the free account, get the free tier, and
Literally.
start making stuff. Or pay like if you sign up to OpenAI's developers portal and you put in $10, that's a ton of development, you know.
Oh my
And like
gosh, it's
even
wild.
with exchange rate, $10 is still a lot, but you're using like cents of a cent to start with, and you can
Mm,
do so much stuff. So yeah, I definitely hear you on that. Like the ease of development now, like it feels like the giants that we're standing on the shoulders of also grew like 200, 300 feet, you know, like they're suddenly way bigger and we're seeing way further than we could from this vantage point that we didn't have back in 2015. So yeah,
totally.
I
Yeah.
totally get you on that. So after Arizona, you have a PhD.
Yep.
What's next for young Joan?
Yeah, yeah. Well, University of Arizona was phenomenal. I must give back. And my advisor was just open every door. It was like a yes
Mm.
and like my research project. I was just like, it was bigger than I had ever anticipated. And I did consulting on the side. Um, got my PhD, was working on getting that job into tech, taking that next step, taking that next leap. I got a job at Nuance, working on their phone trees, and optimizing and working on the back end of enterprise. It was so exciting, going from like startup and like academia to like enterprise, like the back end of
Huge.
Boeing, the back end of like I remember opening the tool and seeing the back end of Verizon. I was like, whoa, like this is the real back end. Like
Yeah.
whoa, it really
Don't delete anything, right? Like the
oh my
nerves of
god.
messing with like that bigger back end.
And it was just, I mean, I don't mean to be throwing any, but like it was so disorganized. And I was
Mm.
like, this is enterprise grade? Like this was deployed. Like, this would not have passed the mustard back in my PhD,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that's the theory to practice, what actually gets shipped.
Yeah.
Um,
What goes into production. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that's like overall, you know, from the outside of enterprise or the outside of big business, you're like, everything is going so smoothly. They have must have wonderful systems internally. They've got all their together.
Yeah.
Then like once you open those back doors, you're like, oh no, no one knows what's going on. So I think like you should never be worried about, you know, you're just like a like for me, you know, a one person in the back of a rural New Zealand house that you can't make a difference or you can't, you know, build your own thing. You totally can. It's easy.
Yeah.
Well, not easy, but like
It's possible.
it's possible and it's like tangibly possible. It's not like just someone going, you know, put on your dream board or your vision board this thing.
Mm,
It's like, well, if you watch these tutorials and follow these steps, then you can get on and then use your own life experience to build further on that. So your first job at Nuance, you see this, you know, back end. I can imagine your displeasure at it being disorganized. And where did you go from there?
yeah. Well, from there, I got a well, we got to back up at least a year because I launched Women in Voice.
Mm-hmm.
I went to, or like the languages and humanities type places to the like tech places. It was a completely different demographic. And I kept feeling like I was being slapped in the face of just like, there are no women in the building. There are no black people anywhere. Like it was just this, it felt like I was just like picked up and like dropped in a new environment. And I was like, wow. So I launched Women in Voice in 2018 in August, worked at Nuance, and then I started doing tons of speaking. So there was just like Joan getting put on stage in fancy dresses, like back to back to back. And from there, I met another company and worked at Versa, this innovative agency based out of Australia. They had their like innovation expansion team that I sat on as like doing pre-sales for different companies, talking about the opportunities for voice technology and conversational AI and different enterprise solutions. So it was honestly like they just wanted me to do more public speaking and being an influencer, a very similar job to Nuance and very similar to my PhD background, but also I was closer to the biz dev people. Like I really interacted with sales in a more tangible way. Yeah, and that job was just meteoric. I was traveling so much. I honestly, I was getting scared at how much I was traveling. Like, and I was really effective with customers, so they kept wanting to send me places. But then the pandemic hit, and projects just fell out of the sky. And there was a layoff of about a third of the company was laid off in a day. That company still survives, but not to the scale it was. And I then started working just different startups, gig here, gig there, different things. I mean, honestly, that's what when we talk about like my career, is that where was the 9 to 5? Where was the stability? Most of my stability was more in grad school of like jobs that I was the assistant for somebody. Um, it's been cacophonous. I don't know. I've been laid off twice from big AI startup things. But like when I think about the tangible projects, the customers I worked with, like voracious learning and my salary and just like packages of compensation kept increasing dramatically. Women in Voice scaled. We tripled in size during the first few months of the pandemic because suddenly everyone was online. And so all these different events and people like, I need community. I want to be part of something, just skyrocketed. My ability to know how to negotiate my contracts radically changed. I have some amazing mentors who, gosh, my friend told me that there were signing bonuses, like that existed. And I was like, are you cheating? Like, what's going on there? Like, tell me more. And so really thinking about how I negotiate a salary and bonuses, like the whole structure. It's in my book. Go check it out. All my 18, I think it's 18 revenue streams, ridiculous number. But all the little percentages and numbers that one needs to negotiate for executive packages, negotiating title. So there's kind of this volatile growth that goes on, and that people have seen from my Twitter, when I was an influencer on Twitter, to now on LinkedIn, and just getting to do just cool projects. I was so excited about Voice, and then really thinking about how that has evolved into an integrated part of the stack, but it's not the only thing I care about. And kind of that, I don't know. I think at one point I was like married to Voice. I was like, Voice is the future. And now I'm like, Voice is a part
of the
of the
future.
future.
Yeah. It's all about that modality.
Yeah. So, yeah. And then I started Clarity AI last year, mostly just because people started, wanting to hire me. Like I was recentering myself after some changes, and I was at a happy hour. I was just like, I didn't even want to be at the happy hour. Honestly, I was like, oh, get my butt out the door. And people were like, oh, I could hire you. Wait, I had this project with this NLP. Could we talk about this? And like, there was all these follow-up calls, and here we are. So, yeah.
It's like, it's funny how like all these different pathways do lead to now, and like decisions that may have felt like not the right choice turn out to be like, oh, well, it helped you create this skill set that you can now use now, like everything you learn is, there's this Tarantino movie that talks about the main character has all these useless skills. Like she literally says, oh, and that's useless skill number XYZ. But at the end sequence, she uses them all together, all these like apparently useless skills. And you're like, oh yeah, it mimics what you've spoken about, in that you may learn something new because the job dictates, or you speak to someone new and you have a new contact. But all these little factors can lead to bigger and cooler projects. I mean, that's what we want to do, build cool stuff with cool people that have great impact. So on sort of like that journey leads well into, if you were a student or a grad, or you wanted to change careers now, apart from reading your upcoming book, what guidance would you give someone?
Yes. Well, I've talked about this many times, and it's definitely featured in the second section of my book. I have this rule called the 80% people, 15% projects, and the rest is skills. That your network is crucial to validating your ideas and paths, knowing about the next projects and things. Like your like, even as we're like literally building AI, people was the advice I got from my mentor back in the day. And I thought he was exaggerating. Like literally, he's a very, very senior guy at a medical company. And when we sign contracts, there are two names. When I hear about the coolest opportunity, it's because someone knew somebody and they referred them to me. You and I are just like the humanness of the ecosystem. So really investing in your career, learning how to network, talking about your personal brand, getting credit for the work you've already done, this type of thing, projects being really actionable, tangible things. as you mentioned, like, are you really excited about this robotics thing? Cool. What's a prototype? What's a
Mm.
next step? What, go to that tutorial. Like, even you don't have to make a startup of it or like spend 8 months like wigging it out, but like get validation from your community. Go to a robotics event. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, take the next prototype step down the path. That kind of that iterative approach, collaborative approach. Um, and then not just getting certificates and just like stacking them up somewhere. Like, really, if you need a skill and you say, hey, wow, a little bit more Python would get me to this next level. I keep hearing from all these other people that this is the tangible thing. Okay, I'll invest in that, but not 90% skill and 10% hoping people will notice, which is
It's
what.
like boils down to talk about it, right? Like if you have
Mm,
a passion, talk about it. Because not only will that help you find your people and
yeah,
like collaborators or future teammates or whatever, it helps with that validation and building out that network.
for
But yeah,
sure.
I totally think you're right about how like it's also reasonably old fashioned to do that thing of like many certificates that, you know, sit on my wall. But like the actionable skill of implementation of that
Mhm.
learning isn't ever done. And so, yeah, little projects is the way forward
Well,
and
and
talking
I
about them.
think the curiosity and the future proofing of our career and our lives is that curiosity, is that
Mm.
continued investment. Like, I usually make the joke of like, if you choose not to learn anymore, you're going to fossilize or like either evolve or die. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
really, like to think again back to this like 30-year career of doing the exact same thing from 9 to 5. Are you a cog in Ford's machinery? Like, I would be, well, who knows?
But the
Let,
interesting thing, like we can't dismiss, is that some of those people who are still in those 40-year
yeah.
roles, like they are such knowledge keepers. And like,
Mm,
what is going to happen when they retire? Like,
yeah. My
like
friend's working
that's
on
where
that.
we should be talking to make sure we can implement the next stage of what that business person looks like or like what their
Mhm.
role is fulfilled by. But I think, you know, this intergenerational knowledge, there is a bit of a fear that that can just be cut and we start back from scratch. So like
Yeah.
looking at what's been done before, but not going, oh, because we've done it that way, that's the way we should do it, and having open eyes to different opportunities is super key.
I quote you in my book talking about that.
Oh, really?
That's how it's always been, like
Yeah.
normalizes horrific things that
Oh,
are not okay.
absolutely horrific things. And like poor decisions. And the funny thing is, like, the people who, you know, there's probably heaps of stuff that we do because that's the way we've always done it. But like the person who first made that decision didn't like go, this is the way that we will always do it henceforth, you know?
Mm,
And like, I think that's also a thing when you're on sort of like this beginning journey, say you're getting into AI. Some decisions you make, you can absolutely roll back on. Like you don't,
mm,
and I think we've encountered this as we've developed clarity as well, is like you can get so bogged down with going, is this the right decision? But it doesn't have to be the right decision forever and ever. It can be, is this the right decision for now?
yeah.
And deciding which decisions you can roll back and which ones you have to really like worry about probably saves a bunch of time. So your guidance is basically talk about it, find your network,
And people, yeah,
yeah,
no,
people, and invest in yourself, right?
yeah,
Like, so
definitely.
if either spending time or money on improving your skill set or leadership qualities or ways to engage your networks. Are there, if someone hears the podcast today and they're listening out there in listener land and say, wow, I want to do projects just like this, what are your recommendations for them?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's back to the advice I was just providing, but the concept of your network, the coffee chats, the building, like the people who's doing the work, read their work,
Mm,
talk to them, the tangible projects and like visuals of those projects that you can speak to that are packaged up. I think like there's nothing to it but to do it kind
mm,
of thing. And often I meet people who, I don't mean to be rude, but they're holding themselves back mentally, or there's some block, and it's frequently confidence, unfortunately, or there's like a negative voice, friend, parent, maybe it's themselves a saboteur, but like, no one looks like me, or I can't do that because I don't have $3 million, or whatever that voice is. But there's something between all and nothing, I swear,
yeah.
of just this next little step, and see if it doesn't feel right. Oof, that's not the right thing. Cool, we don't need to go down that path, but to take that next little bite.
Mm. Because like William says, you can eat an elephant if you take one bite at a time. Just a
I
little
think that's
nibble.
your phrase. I don't know that that's William, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I used it again recently. Yeah, maybe I will take ownership of it. But yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And like, it's also, we encounter lots of tech bros in our careers where they're like, oh yeah, I've started my new startup. We've got $5 million invested in our seed round from our parents, and it's like, that is not accessible to everyone at all in the slightest. It's that sort of, already having money enables you to take huge risk with whatever you do. But I think because of the ecosystem now that with AI and like no code solutions and access to APIs and all that kind of stuff, and access to networks, like I cold DM'd someone quite famous the other day, and like you could never do that in 1999. There's no way.
What did you do?
Like just cold DM'd.
Oh, you cold DM'd. Excuse
Yeah.
me. I was
So
like, what's cold beaming? Okay.
the accent. Yeah. So I think that risk is way less. So you can keep the
Yeah.
stability of your 9 to 5 if you have one, and take little risks instead of having to be like all in. And you hear it a lot in startup hustle culture as well, that you have to be 100% into your project. Well, eventually, but you could start off with like 2%.
Mm-hmm.
Do a little bit.
Well, I think that's the democratization that's going on right now, is that like
Totally.
you don't need 5 million to start something. Like you
Or a
really,
PhD.
or a PhD. Please do not get a PhD. I cannot recommend it to the 99% of people who ask me about getting one. I'm like, I don't recommend it to almost anybody. It was a seeming requirement back in the day. If someone wants to work in AI, you don't need a PhD. You want to become an entrepreneur, still don't need a PhD. You really want to become an academic? The whole industry is dying. Like, oi, cannot recommend. So I think really think about what lights you up, what are opportunities, getting in the door, talking to people, being heard differently. I think it's a great day for they didn't make me sign an NDA, so I'll say them out loud. There's a fancy big luxury band. I won't say them out loud. And I was talking to them about AI tools and democratization, and the stakeholder like jaw drop, like, democratization? Like, we don't want that. We're a legacy brand. And I was like, have you not seen Canva? Like, do you not see Elf Beauty just like raking in the money? Like, again, back to the evolve, or I'm very worried about you.
Perish. Yeah. Absolutely. So you just mentioned like not getting a PhD. See, I have a slightly different view on that, in that I'm seriously worried about like students entering computer science for like junior dev, cog in the wheel jobs. That's done. Like I think that position will be filled by AI quickly. But we still need senior people. We need those innovators and the people who are pushing the boundaries of what can be done. But if they don't necessarily go through that junior development cycle, where are they coming from? And I think that's yet to be answered. But it will be. There will always be those people who come through, with innovative solutions, but I don't think it's necessarily through the traditional academic track anymore. So programs, certificates, jobs, things you have to do.
Things you have to do. Well, I just want to speak to your dev thing, because I spoke at a conference recently, and people were like, I thought I had a secure position. I thought software engineering or data science, 6-figure job, I'm stable. Not the case. And when they hear my talks, they get even more. And I think you're right, of like the CTO path may still have a lot of that developmental stuff, but like, but I just talked to my friend who works at Chewy as a software engineer. She's like, Joan, I'm not worried about my job. It's so manual here. Like, I will be rock solid for a long time.
There's a lot of enterprises still using like Windows 95. So, although there is this hype that it will go, and it will go eventually, there's still this like large corporations move very, very, very slowly. They hold a lot of cash and provide a lot of jobs. So I don't think it's this immediate thing, but like definitely my children probably won't go through that traditional role. Like it probably won't exist by the time they're entering the workforce. But yeah, I guess my concerns is about, there's a movie that you might not have seen called Idiocracy.
Yeah, no.
It's not a well-made movie. It's not a particularly good movie, but it speaks about how like we hit this certain level of technology and people kind of can stop trying. It's also represented well in the Disney Pixar movie WALL-E.
Oh
But
yeah.
like, like there gets to be a point where because everything becomes so easy and automated and done for you, that you can kind of give up in a way. And I hope that instead of what's represented in those movies where the world becomes very, very stupid in idiocracy, and in WALL-E we become those sort of like sausage things floating around in
Yeah,
chairs.
yeah.
Yeah. And not questioning anything. I hope it's more like Renaissance style, where it has this like huge, and obviously bad things happen in the Renaissance as well, but like, there was a global spurt of creativity. And I'm hoping it's that sort of future rather than not.
Well, I'm hoping
Yeah.
it's more, yeah, I think a creativity, but also a freedom. Like I talk to people who, I'm like, I don't think we need to be sitting in front of screens for 60 hours a week for our
No.
day jobs. I really think that if I get some of my work done, I'm like, let's go take a nap. Let's go work out, like play with my dog. Like there's so many things that fuel creativity and my ability to, or like productivity in different ways to do work
Yeah.
differently.
And that might give a more return to local community as well, which would be super
Mm.
good for everyone involved. And like I recently saw this thing about how they've sort of reevaluated how Neanderthals spent their time. And like
Oh.
originally it was like, they spent 8 hours hunting and gathering all day and they were, subsistent living, and it was terrible, terrible time. And then like new sort of research has been done based off like middens and fire pits that show that actually they had like 6 to 8 hours of leisure time, which was community
Mm.
building and cultural building. And like that sounds super cool instead of spending, 10 hours a day in front of a computer and not talking to the person next to you in a cubicle, or not knowing who your neighbors are. So yeah,
Mm.
hopefully like the overall impact of AI on life in general is good.
I hope so too. Well, and I also, one of the things or just as we think about this, one of the key stories about this I've also been thinking about is my friend who works in financials and like the shape of his job and what's on paper is his job and why he's actually valuable. This is like, he literally is going to training about AI in his company. They're like upskilling and he works in finance. But the spreadsheets that he works on is not the secret sauce.
Mm.
The secret sauce is that he's really good with fiery, angry PMs. See, I'm dead serious. Like these very, very intense conversations that are happening amongst clients and customers and project managers who have their own domain expertise and they don't want to deal with nitty gritty financials of this invoice is outstanding $150,000 and been waiting and then we're changing three number or like do you know what I mean? Like these the emotional communication stuff is what my friend excels in.
Mm.
And I don't see that being automated by a bot anytime soon. They
No.
have legacy, they have super, super legacy software. And I'm like, someone or some AI could help with the spreadsheet. Could it help with these multi-stakeholder conversations of intense anger? It's a whole, do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's why if he wants to be employed in that sector, he will have a job for a very long time.
Yeah, so like leaning into the skill that he's really amazing at, and then figuring out how this AI automation ML line can support the other part of his job so he can get
Mhm.
even more amazing at the skill that he
Yeah,
has.
yeah.
Yeah, I like that vision of the future. So what's your soundbite? What's the one takeaway? What is going to be the catch line for this interview?
Oh gosh.
Yeah, summarize all of that in one sentence.
Being open to change, being the world keeps changing in front of our eyes, so the path evolves as we evolve. So there's this dynamism on both sides. I'd say I certainly I'm from Portland originally, so like the kind of the hipster contrarian part of me that says like people say I should do this, but those people don't seem happy. Or like checking in with those truths for myself included, being like, "Ooh, that path seemed cool." Then I tried it, and actually, not so much. Like I think that like being in tune with oneself, it's very complicated trying to be in tune with oneself. The ecosystem is changing. You're changing. Like this openness or like optimism that I think through my career, every time I've been like, I'm gonna fall so hard right on my face. It's gonna be the worst thing. Has been right before like the dark before the dawn.
Mm.
Like some of the biggest like things I thought were terrors soon thereafter, I signed the biggest deal of my life, or, some amazing radical thing happened. Signing this book deal, what things may become next, hopefully signing my first 8-figure deal very, very soon. Like thinking about what failure does or doesn't mean. I know that I'm a white woman and I have wild amounts of privilege in some respects, but this larger optimistic picture is what I'd really want this person who's listening to take away.
It sounds like a really good thing for them to take away. Yeah,
Oh.
I totally think that you're right in that everything feels really dynamic and moving, and like we do hear about like the stability, that maybe the previous generation had to us. Which may not come around again for a while, and being open to that change is so important, and like not fighting it.
Well, I think I see great opportunity in the volatility. Like the agency that I have now in my life compared to other stages of my life, like anyone could be making money in all kinds of different ways and don't have to be chained to a desk at a day job. Like, I think that's fabulous.
That's the soundbite. Anyone can be doing anything and making money and having great impact on the world
Yeah.
without being chained to a desk.
Seriously, I future proof your income. My team is trying to find a phrase that like has this, like rich with no day job. Or like my income is future proofed. So like fire me as you wish. But like some people aren't there yet. Some people are still in the scarcity. I'm
Well,
terrified.
and they have to be like,
Yeah.
there is, like like you mentioned, there's privilege here where we can be like, it's okay to take this risk because of previous things or like our circumstances or whatever. But like reiterating that some of the risks you can take are really little and they could lead to great things, and
Totally.
embracing their volatility.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I think not letting anxiety sit in the driver's seat. I
Mm.
certainly struggle with anxiety in certain places and times, and acknowledging my fear and doing it anyway. That's what
Yeah.
I was freaking out. One of our customers wanted to triple the SOW or greenlight the biggest SOW that we proposed to them. And like in the meeting when they were like, yeah, we want it. We're gonna greenlight it. I like was driving to dance cardio. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this might actually happen. Like, is my team ready for this? Like, I'm driving over there and I was talking to my mom. My mom's like, maybe you should just opt out. Maybe you should just like not say like the SOW was nice, but like we're actually not going to do it. Or like she heard my anxiety is like, don't do it. And I was like, Mom, I've been working for 10 months to get this type of opportunity. Like, I am both terrified, excited, like maybe that's my own like oh because of excitement like driving to dance cardio, but like pushing myself pushes our team, pushes the impact we can have. Like I am delighted to do that project. I'm terrified, but like that impact that we can have in the world, and to feel that expansion feeling in my muscles and my squats as I go to dance cardio. Like, instead of this scrappy fear mongering thing, and I know it's not for everybody, and someone may be listening to this and be like, this doesn't fit my life at all. I mean,
I
I'm
don't want to be terrified.
right, that terror does not sound good, and you're maybe struggling to pay the bills or you're
Yeah.
underwater in debt. I really, if you read my book, if you continue consuming my content, there are specific steps and paths to paying the bills, future-proofing your income, and doing really cool stuff.
Totally.
Yeah. Okay.
That's excellent advice. Excellent takeaways. And that was the last question on the list.
Bing bong. Okay, well, Jennie, you know me quite well these days. We've known each other several years. Are there things that you would like to make sure people know? Secrets of the Joan working with me, etc., that we would want to make sure to cover?
Maybe just like a short thing about how serving your own physical and mental health enables you to, be most productive in your work life as well. Like I can't think of what the specific question there is, but like some sort of statement around like, how can you do it all, Joan?
Doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I openly talk about going to therapy. It's amazing. It is super freaking helpful. I have a great therapist. I work out. I literally was writing part of the book the other day and my brain got to a glitch. I was like, oh, how do I rate this section? Like, oh, you know what? I'm at a block. I'll just go on a walk. Literally didn't even finish the block. And my brain had already fixed the problem. I kept going on the walk. But like, I did, like, the ability to, the physical and mental health are interconnected. And my ability to work out, take care of my mind, take breaks, work on rest, like prioritizing rest is something I've struggled with as a self-described workaholic. And so really to be able to serve my team well, to be able to serve my customers well, my family and friends, I have to take care of my physical body. And things like dance cardio are just like super helpful of getting like wiping the brain. And that, I think also the other thing we haven't talked about much, Jenny, is the investing stuff. We just talked about money, but like I think being an investor has been really important to me of like what gets built.
Do you want to just say a little bit about like
Yeah.
how you started on that investment journey, and like from like an outside perspective, I imagine that people think that to be an investor you have to have millions and millions and millions
Yeah.
stacked away, and it's a complex process. So like, how would you describe to the listener how you got started on that journey, and like how can they do it?
Yeah. Well, I have never been on a golf course. No, I first started thinking about investing in the way I do right now when I realized that, like, I was like, what projects get greenlit? What projects happen at companies? The founders get to decide. Why do the founders get to decide? The investors invest in them. There's kind of this like streamlined thing of like, who is the agency to make the decisions, basically? And I was like, who are the investors and why do they, or like, oh, this whole like power structure. And once I realized the investors have a huge outsized power dynamic in this ecosystem, I wanted to learn how to get in that room or be there. So as Jenny jokingly, you talk about like, you don't need millions and millions. Like to invest in the stock market here in the United States, I think it's like literally $1 on sites like Public or SoFi or otherwise. To invest in startups, even if you're not mega wealthy, you can do crowdfunding, which is how I certainly started. Of I believe in this company that is doing really cool hair products for Black women and Black women's hair. If I can give $50 to be a micro investor into this crowdfunding deal. I learned from my mentors. I took some classes about how you think about boring investments in houses in the stock market and how you probably want a sliver of your portfolio. Disclaimer, I'm not certified, but thinking about your financial picture, some of them should be high risk, very volatile, hugely opportunistic, and you could lose it all. But that being a sliver of your portfolio and supporting startups you believe in. So writing checks. There's one thing to like say you like a company. There's another thing to actually give them money. And to have the teeny little sliver of the money. So it's really, I don't know, my friend told me the other day, she's like, wow, you call yourself an investor? I'm like, well, I am an investor. She's like, how many young women like self-identify as the word investor? I really want more of us. Please join me.
Love it. That's really cool. Another question that I'll ask that might be useful for the listeners is like, throughout this interview, you've said the word mentor or advisor a whole lot. Like, how did you build this stable of people to help you? And like, I imagine that you're a mentor and advisor to another group of people as well.
Yeah.
How did you build that group, that village? And then that's probably the most interesting part.
Yeah. When my time at UC Davis was not going well, and the people technically on paper that were not helping my career, or like I felt this dissonance between like helping my career and like person on paper, it wasn't matching up. I built relationships relatively organically with professors I really respected, or like go to their office hours, let them know who I am. I will absolutely say that I was the person in the front row, making sure I did every reading, raising my hand, like being very visible was relatively easy for me. But cultivating the relationship, asking them for things back and forth. I think one of the words about mentor or like mentee, there's a power dynamic of like the one who learns from the older one kind of world. And I don't think about that as I've learned more, because like I talked to my friend the other day, and he's like, well, you're my mentor. And I was like, what? You're my mentor. Or like we both actively learn from each other.
That's
Um,
so funny.
so the power dynamics, or we have such complementary and different skill sets that he told me he's jealous of my career in some respects. I was like, what? I'm jealous of your career in some respects. Like, wow. Anyway, but these dedicated mutualistic relationships that both parties are benefiting, continuing to follow up, asking for help in different respects, the trust and respect that's it's grown. So being almost burned in at UC Davis, moving to University of Arizona, I was like, I'm gonna build my network here. I like found this huge Rolodex of professors. I'm gonna go to everybody's office hours. I'm gonna figure out the people who will help me open those doors. And then through Women in Voice, or just like the people always got me. I actually have a table in the book, if it makes it through all the editing, the coolest opportunities of my life and the person who got them for me, or like the person who was the connector. And there's like a list of like 20 different things of like, you think I just applied? No. I built a relationship. I got the recommendation. This person was the key to unlocking this possibility. Like I said, did I mention, I've lived it out. People, invest in your network.
Nice, very nice. Yeah, and it's like such a conscious choice, right? Like you say,
Oh my gosh, it
beautiful
pays
sound bites.
dividends.
Yeah,
Yeah.
perfect. That's all I got. That's all the questions, and I think there's more than enough things to excite the audience.
Yay. Jenny, thank you for your time.
It's
It's
a
very
pleasure.
precious. I know I get to see more of you than most, but she's a day and a half ahead of me, folks. We mostly do a lot of Slack.
Async for the win.
Async for the win. Still exceptionally productive. Well, Jenny, thank you for your time. Thank you for interviewing me on this bonus episode for our guests.
It's
Really
a
appreciate
pleasure, absolute pleasure, and we'll talk again really soon.
it. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Oh, gosh, was that fun? Did you enjoy that episode as much as I did? Well, now be sure to check out our show notes for this episode that has tons of links and resources and our guest bio, etc. Go check it out. If you're ready to dive in to personalize your AI journey, download the free Your AI Roadmap workbook at yourairoadmap.com/workbook. Well, maybe you work at a company and you're like, hey, we want to grow in data and AI, and I'd love to work with you. Please schedule an intro and a sync with me at Clarity AI at higherclarity.ai. We'd love to talk to you about it. My team builds custom AI solutions, digital twins, optimizations, data, fun stuff for small and medium-sized businesses. Our price points start at 5, 6, 7, 8 figures, depends on your needs, depending on your time scales, etc. If you liked the podcast, please support us. Can you please rate, review, subscribe, send it to your friend, DM your boss, follow wherever you get your podcasts. I certainly learned something new, and I hope you did too. Next episode drops soon. Can't wait to hear another amazing expert building an AI. Talk to you soon. Hey folks, welcome to your AI Bootcamp. My name is Joan Bajorek. I am so excited to invite you to join Cohort 1 of your AI Bootcamp. What is this bootcamp all about? Well, it's literally the answers to all the folks in my DMs asking how I did it. This 4-week intensive bootcamp is about your professional brand, setting your goals, being seen for the work you've already done, and big coffee outreach. I strongly recommend you come join us. I invite you. It's going to be awesome. People are already signing up from all around the world. Check it out at yourairoadmap.com/career. Hope to see you there.